Whenever we're put in a position of influence, there's a temptation to become puffed up. Well, today on Truth for Life, Alistair Begg issues a warning for leaders, especially pastors, to remember the weakness of power. Alistair is teaching from the story of King Uzziah in 2 Chronicles chapter 26.
I wonder, do you read the obituaries? If you don't, then I suggest that you, as of today, resolve to make it your practice. I don't mean just the routine stuff that says he was here and he left, but in a relatively good newspaper, if you go online, you can go to the Times. That is the Times. There is, after that, the New York Times and other Times, but there is the Times. And there you can read some fine obituaries. And I like to read them and to keep them and to boast about the fact that I've done so, as you can tell. And because of a number of things. One, you get mini biographies. You get insights into people's lives, the things that mark them, usually some succinct expressions of that. And you're also introduced to people about whom you've known absolutely nothing, and you're reminded of your own mortality, and you're confronted with a question of what kind of legacy you're going to leave. Some of you may have heard that recently Larry Laprise, who wrote the Hokey Cokey, or Hokey Pokey as you refer to it here, he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 93. Apparently the most traumatic part for his family was getting him into his coffin. They put his left leg in, and then the trouble started. That is a shameful abuse of the pulpit, really, but for example, I have one in here. It says Joseph Charles, 91, a symbol of street corner friendliness. This is from the 20th of March, 2002. And the byline reads, for 31 years, cheery salutes for 4,500 people a day from 7:45 to 9:30 a.m. There's a wonderful story of a man who moved into a house in October of 1962. Mr. Charles stepped out of his newly purchased white clapboard house in Berkeley, California, and waved to neighbors down the block. And they waved back, and the waving quickly became a ritual. At first, Mr. Charles said, people thought I was crazy. They called me a communist. He waved at people, and they called him a communist. And they said I would cause a wreck. But one person waved back, and then another, and some honked, and a motorist gave him a pair of yellow gloves, and they became his trademark, and he eventually owned 20 pairs of yellow gloves. It's estimated that each day he waved to at least 4,500 people, nearly 1.2 million a year. And when his right arm grew tired, he used his left. Joseph Charles, a symbol of street corner friendliness. I could go through, I won't bore you with it. It's a helpful process, and I think you'll benefit from it if you don't already do so. I hope also that you visit cemeteries with frequency. I wonder, do you ever study in a cemetery? You ever park your car at least on one of the driveways and read your Bible there? Did you ever get out and walk up and down and look at the dates and find yourself staggered by the fact that they're catching you up? That a decade ago it didn't seem as painful as it does today. That all of a sudden, whatever your particular vintage is, it's begun to creep in. One of the most recent graves in the Chagrin Cemetery has almost my identical dates, a young woman who died of cancer. Well, of course, the writer of Ecclesiastes says it's always better to go to a funeral than to go to a party, because death is the destiny of every man, and the living should take this to heart. And without being melodramatic in any way, there is nothing quite like the prospect of death to clarify the issues of life. And each of us is confronted by the fact that our lives will finally be summarized in some measure by just the chipping away of a chisel on a tombstone, and the totality of who we are and what we've done will be marked actually by a dash of maybe 3 or 4 inches. For me, it will read 1952 dash and then a closing date. And the question is, what are we doing with the dash between the dates? And if there's anything that goes on the tombstone that says anything about us, not that anyone will care for very long, we don't live with that kind of illusion. I won't be remembered by many, my children for a while. Beyond that, nothing much. But to the extent that anything would be put there, the only thing that can realistically be put there, can honestly be put there at the end of our days, is that which, by our lives in the providence and mercy of God, is possible to be put there. And that's again why going through old graveyards can be fun, because you find these wonderful statements to the person who was there. I won't bore you with any beyond this, but this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Interred beneath this kirkyard stone, interred beneath this kirkyard stone, lies stingy Jimmy Wyatt, who died one morning just at 10 and saved a dinner by it. Now, I marvel that his family was bold or foolish enough to put that on there. But anyone that knew Wyatt would have gone through and said, that's him. I mean, that is him. He was a stingy rascal, you know. Imagine dying in the morning so that he didn't have to pay for his dinner. How tragic would it be? How tragic would it be if after years of usefulness, one were to leave a legacy that spoke only of failure? Look at what the people said at the end of verse 23. Especially in light of everything that we read in the opening section of the chapter. And the people came around and they said he had leprosy. Just 3 words. What about Uzziah? Oh, Uzziah had leprosy. Is that it? Well, no, it's not it. But it's true. Paul Simon, who said that the signs of the prophets are written on the subway walls and the cinema and the tenement halls and whispered in the sounds of silence, has a wonderful song way back in the 60s called Most Peculiar Man, if you remember it. He was a most peculiar man. That's what Mrs. Reardon says, and she should know. She lived upstairs from him. She said he was a most peculiar man. He had no friends, and he seldom spoke, and no one in turn ever spoke to him, because he wasn't friendly, and he didn't care, and he wasn't like them. He was a most peculiar man. He died last Saturday. He turned on the gas and he went to sleep with the windows closed so he'd never wake up to his silent world in his tiny little room. And Mrs. Reardon says he has a brother somewhere who should be notified soon. And all the people said, what a shame that he's dead. But wasn't he a most peculiar man? And all the people said, what a shame that he's dead. He had leprosy. That marked him. He wrote his epitaph, if you like, in 5 minutes. Having taken decades to build a life of character. Now, if yesterday Jehoshaphat represented something to us of an individual who speaks of the power of weakness, then Uzziah is the flip side, giving to us, and he is the great, great, great grandson of Jehoshaphat, giving to us an illustration of the weakness of power. You see, Jehoshaphat leaves a lasting impression when you read those 3 chapters. I'm sure you all did for your homework as directed. And he leaves the impression not of being a good man or being a great man, although he was both of those things, but he leaves the impression of being a weak man. Now, we didn't deal with it yesterday morning, but the weakness that finally in the crunch became a benefit in his life was not all benefit. Because when you read carefully those chapters, you recognize that Jehoshaphat apparently was too weak ever to say no to anyone. And because he couldn't say no, he got himself in military liaisons, he got himself in commercial ventures, he allowed his family into marital status that was directly related to his weakness. But when, in the crunch, he faced his weakness, then it became the means of his success. A few chapters on here with Uzziah, we have a contrast because he is a strong man. By any standards, he's strong, he's powerful, he's decisive, he displays visionary leadership. All of which is actually praiseworthy. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But when it came to the crunch for Uzziah, he answered the psalmist's question wrongly. And answering the question incorrectly proved to be his downfall. What question am I referring to? Well, Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? Now, at a certain point in his life, Uzziah would have said, absolutely, categorically, my help comes from God. All that I am, all that he has made me, all that he has given me, all that he has granted me is from God. But at some point along the way, he changed his tune. And he began to conclude that in actual fact, he was the source of his own power and of his own wisdom and of his own insight and of his own influence. Now, 2/3 of the chapter describes the positive impact of his leadership. By any standards, he's a remarkable young man. He is, if you like, a whiz kid in contemporary jargon, or at least the contemporary jargon of the 60s. He's a whiz kid. He, at 16 years of age, with his father presumably still torturing along before his dad is murdered, he is beginning to exercise influence. His name, Uzziah, actually means the Lord, my strength. So his very name speaks to the fact that his strength is in the Lord. Stepping into the place of responsibility, he is able to take charge, apparently, of all aspects of national life. And he puts his mark on them for good. Now, yesterday morning, I introduced you to the important principle of plan neglect, and we will operate under that principle again. It would be tedious for me just to go through and rehash the breadth of the impact of his reign in terms of national security and military advance and commercial development and agricultural success and so on. It's not necessary for the purpose of our emphasis here in the heart of this chapter. The bottom line is he apparently had the Midas touch. He was one of these infuriating characters that no matter what he turned his hand to, he was successful. I went to school with boys like that. Not only did they get straight A's in their A-levels, but they always won the mile. I could have tolerated the straight A's provided they did not win the mile, or if they won the mile, I don't want them to get straight A's, but to get both. And they could always play the piano. Just infuriating characters. Up for any challenge. Able to see around the corners. He presides over the affairs of his nation with significant influence. Now, the chronicler takes us a little bit behind the scenes. It's always fun to get into the dressing room, isn't it? I mean, if you go to a sporting event, you look at it from the stands and you wonder what was going on. I wonder, did he put his left sock on first or his right sock? I wish I could get in there and find out. I wonder what the coach said. I wonder what makes him tick. And the chronicler wonderfully doesn't simply give to us all of this information about geographical expansion and the impact that he has made on the community, But he gives to us these, if you like, hidden factors, which he identifies as the very keys that made Uzziah the leader that he was. So let me point these things out. Verse 4. What is it that underpins this remarkable man? Well, number one, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He asked the question, what is the right thing to do? Presumably there was something of the spirit of Daniel about him as a younger man. That there had been the influences from his family on his life. The statement here, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done, may be giving us a little clue to the fact that his father started well and finished poorly. And the chronicler may be suggesting, if you read on, you're going to find out that that's exactly what happened. But I think that's a little far-fetched. The commentators, some of them, make much of that. I think it's sufficient to say that this boy got off to a great start. He was aware of the fact that the law of the Lord is perfect, that it revives the soul, and that the statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, and they make wise the simple. And if we had seen him in his early years, there would have been about him a sort of moral rectitude and a concern to make sure that you got a pound for a pound and that the correct change was given. And he spoke with scrupulous honesty concerning all that was under his province. And also we're told in verse 5 that he sought God. He sought God. What an amazing little phrase that is. And you will seek me and you will find me, the prophet says. God says through the prophet, if you search for me with all of your heart. And you wonder, well, what does this mean in his life? What was it like in the mornings when he awakened? In the morning when I rise? And when he went to bed at night, the heavens declaring the glory of God, the firmament showing his handiwork, and he's saying, oh God, I look to you. He sought God. And he did so under instruction. He sought God during the days of Zechariah, whom we're unable to actually identify with any clarity. But Zechariah instructed him in the fear of the Lord, in the fear of God. So that he wasn't, if you like, unhinged from relationships, neither familial relationships nor the importance of human friendship. He was, in the context of companionship, we would say today, discipled, nurtured, encouraged, instructed, and instructed in the fear of the Lord. I mean, in contemporary terms, at least in America, you would have gone out early in the morning and somewhere around 6:30 you would have gone into a restaurant somewhere, and over in one of the booths you would have seen, there's Zechariah and Uzziah. And Zechariah would have been there saying to him, come on now, Uzziah. You've got a whole kingdom to care for. You've got a whole world to be concerned about. I see promise in you. Now let me urge you, seek the Lord, do the right thing. And apparently Uzziah showed up for these breakfast meetings with consistency. And verse 5 ends by telling us that there was a direct correlation between the seeking of the Lord and the granting of success. He did what was right. He sought God. He was under instruction, and God gave him success. And we don't need to go again and try and unpack that. The chronicler gives us the indication of the success and in terms of his influence as king. And then we discover in verse 8 that his fame spread. It spread as far as the border of Egypt. This wasn't some kind of local news broadcast. This was getting out and beyond. The word was out concerning Uzziah. There is a king in Judah to be reckoned with. Look what he's done in the restoring of Elath. Israelites don't like sailing. They weren't really big on it. But he's smart enough, shrewd enough to recognize that Elath, although Elath was marked in secular history by a dramatic earthquake, the chronicler doesn't say a thing about the earthquake, which was the most dramatic thing that had happened to the region of Elath. But he says that he was the one who rebuilt Elath. That was the significant thing, because he had visionary leadership. He saw the expansive possibilities of the port when other people didn't. And as those trading vessels moved out then, The word got out. Where did you boys come from? Who dreamt this up? Uzziah. He's our main man. He does it right. He seeks God. He has breakfast meetings. He's famous. And he's very powerful. That's what it says. His fame spread as far as the border of Egypt. Why? Well, because he'd become very powerful. He wasn't famous for being famous. I mean, he didn't get his face on somewhere and he was famous because his face was somewhere. He was famous for a reason. There was a whole barrel load of material, if you like, which gave substance to the things that people said and to the influence that he had. Now, from verse 9 and on, you get a sort of explication of some of his influence and his power and so on. And that leads us again back to the second half of verse 15 and the opening of verse 16. His fame spread far and wide, for he was greatly helped until he became powerful. Okay, so famous. As a result of help, he became powerful. As a result of being powerful, he became famous. Okay. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. So there was a turning point in the life of Uzziah.
A cautionary tale for anyone in a position of authority. Alistair Begg has titled this message, The Weakness of Power. Here at Truth for Life, we are deeply committed to supporting local churches and their pastors. We believe the local church is an essential part of God's design for His people. That's why every October we set aside time to hear instructions specifically geared toward pastors. And that's why we're also excited to be offering a significant book to you today, a book that we believe will be a help for those who serve in church leadership. If you are a pastor or a lay leader, you likely devote time to counseling couples. And you know that helping marriages in crisis has its own set of unique challenges. So our resource for this month is a brand new book that addresses this crucial subject. The book is called Counsel for Couples, and it's written by seasoned marriage counselor Jonathan Holmes. Jonathan draws from a wealth of solid biblical theology in this book. It's a comprehensive volume that addresses common issues that can derail marriages. It also offers step-by-step instruction for how to structure individual sessions, how to conduct effective follow-up. We're happy to send you a copy of the book Counsel for Couples this month to say thank you when you donate to support Truth for Life. You can give and request the book online at truthforlife.org/donate or call 888-588-7884. Again, that's 888-588-7884. By the way, as you make plans for your vacation next summer, don't forget you're invited to join Alistair on an unforgettable cruise to Alaska. Together you will study God's Word as you sail through scenic waters on this beautiful cruise ship. You can find out more by going online to deeperfaithcruise.com. Now, that's a different website from ours here at Truth for Life, so I'll give it to you once more. It's deeperfaithcruise.com. Or you can call the cruise line directly at 855-565-5519. I'm Bob Lapine, hoping you'll join us Wednesday when Alistair continues his cautionary message about the danger of self-reliance. The Bible teaching of Alistair Begg is furnished by Truth for Life, where the learning is for living.